Hello, and welcome to Roy's Book Reviews. In this week's video, I am going to be discussing two novels in tandem. They are two very beautifully, powerfully written novels by African American authors at the tops of their games, and they are two of the saddest stories ever put down on page. These are heartbreaking stories, both of them, in ways that are similar and ways that are different from each other. If you are the type of reader who likes lighthearted stories that have a happy ending so that you can, feel happy at the end, neither of these books may be for you. I am not that type of reader. Not that I have a problem with a happy ending where it's appropriate and fitting, but I am also a big fan of gritty realism in fiction, and those types of stories often do not end well. Even if they end on an optimistic note, they are still largely filled with despair and anguish and unfair treatment of main characters who you come to love, but the society they live in does not. The first book I am going to discuss is A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest J. Gaines. This may be the most heartbreaking book it has ever been my sad pleasure to read. In it, a young man finds himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. And due to his poor decision making on this one ill-fated occasion, he ends up wrongfully accused of murder and condemned to death row. A Lesson Before Dying is set during a time when race relations were strained and tilted heavily in favor of privileged whites at the expense of struggling blacks who were looked down upon. So in other words, a time much worse and yet insufficiently different than the time we live in today here in America. The best that his lawyer can think up as a defense is to compare the defendant to a dung hog, believe it or not. Because he figures, rather than trying to convince a jury of his peers that he didn't do it because he didn't, he will try to convince them that we shouldn't punish him too harshly because he is subhuman and doesn't really deserve to be condemned for actions that he is not intelligent enough to even appreciate the impact of. When this fails to prevent Jefferson from being convicted and sentenced to the electric chair, his godmother calls upon local school grade teacher Grant Wiggins. What she asks of Grant is both simple and seemingly impossible. Jefferson cannot escape an unfair verdict in an unjust world. But instead of pitifully accepting designation as a brute animal, maybe he can find a measure of dignity in his final days, allowing him to take his final steps with head held high, like a man. Grant is a cynic and less than a true believer in what we're taught about God and an awaiting heaven. It takes the bullying of his aunts to make him accept the ultimate teaching assignment. He does his best. Grant does his best. Readers may do their best in the end not to cry, and many will surely fail. It's a beautiful, sad, sad story. A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest J. Gaines. The second book I am going to discuss is Ruby by Cynthia Bond. It's also a devastating book. It's a relentless series of gut punches that batter the soul. The title character is put through a hell that the most evil of people would not wish upon their greatest enemy. What somehow fails to kill Ruby does manage to annihilate her spirit and make her incapable of respecting, much less loving herself. If you can't self-love, then another person has little chance of earning your love. But despite the many horrors witnessed and cruelties visited upon Ruby, she has just enough strength to care for her spiritual children while living a shell of a life perched on the edge of madness. And this keeps her going. Her body is used and abused at the whim of men who take advantage because there is no resistance. But one man is different. A man whose love for Ruby gets him to stand up for her and for himself, rather than mutely accepting what is handed to him. Ephraim shows Ruby that in spite of all that has been done to her and by her, she can still be viewed with tenderness, adoration even. But the world is harsh, atrocities abundant, the devil ever present, people judgmental when not being indifferent. So love is not a big enough miracle to save Ruby, not even the great love that Ephraim is able to show her. Sometimes the only person who can save you is the one found in the mirror. This is not a gentle read, but it is a fantastic one that I highly recommend, as I do recommend also A Lesson Before Dying. They will break your heart. They will get you to question any tender feelings you have about your fellow man. Ultimately, they will show you that there is nothing more resilient than the human spirit. That is the end of my reviews of these two incredible books. Grab either or both of them whenever you are ready for a story that does not deliver a happy ending, but instead delivers harsh, cold reality and incredible prose with an amazing insight into the human condition. Until next time, this is Roy.